Rhythm is literally everywhere, from the music we like, to the words we speak, to the sounds we hear. Finding something without rhythm is near impossible. But let's start with the basics. What is rhythm? Well, the most basic form of rhythm is a steady beat. Here's a steady beat at 120 beats per minute. Most popular music is written in 4/4, which means one measure should contain 4 beats. So, let's accent the start of a measure with a kick drum. Most popular music also places a snare drum onto beats 2 and 4. And there you have it, a very simple drum beat. But I am getting ahead of myself, so let's take the snares out of the equation for now. Counting measures can be something many people overlook learning, but it's important for communication with other musicians. Obviously, each beat of the measure should be counted with its number, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But what if you need to count in between those beats? Many people have different ways of communicating this, but the widest accepted way is to say "and" in between each number. So, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So, if I refer to the "and" of 3, people should be able to recognize that I'm talking about now in the measure. There are ways to communicate even smaller divisions, or divisions from different time signatures, but let's stick with this for now. Let's add those snares back from earlier, on beats 2 and 4 again. And now we know the terminology, let's add 2 more kick drums. One on the "and" of 2, and the other on the "and" of 3. And now, we've built a slightly more complex drum beat, which sounds pretty cool. Rhythm doesn't have to be steady though. Certain beats can be longer or shorter than others, which is called swing. There are 2 main ways to communicate the amount of swing, with percentages or with subdivisions. Let's start with the percentages. First off, we're again talking about 4/4 here, but this time at 80 BPM. A hi-hat will be played every 8th note, so 8 times a measure. A straight beat, like the one from before, is a 50% swing, as it travels exactly half a beat before the "and" arrives. That's essentially all that percentage notation is, the midpoint between beats where the "and" lies. So, a beat at 70% swing would sound like this, and a beat at 20% swing would sound like this. Let's move on to communicating swing via subdivisions. It's, again, very simple. It's simply splitting the time between beats up into subdivisions, and one of those subdivisions, usually the one directly after the halfway point, becomes the "and." Let's split the beat into 7, so into septuplets. The subdivision that comes straight after the halfway point, so the 5th one in this case, is now our "and." So why not just use percentages? They seem so much more simple. Well, in performance scenarios, it's not entirely practical to give an exact swing percentage and expect musicians to play it perfectly. We're not computers, and we can't do that sort of thing, especially when also trying to keep time with other musicians. So it's much better to define the swing using subdivisions, as it's generally easier to play. Let's move on to explore a different rhythmic concept, polyrhythm. The name explains the concept quite well. It's just multiple rhythms being played at the same time. There's only really one way that musicians convey information about polyrhythms, which is by using ratios. To demonstrate how polyrhythms and their ratios work, let's start with the most basic version there is, 1:2. This means that for every beat played on the left-hand side, 2 should be played on the right-hand side. Now let's change to a 2:3 polyrhythm. So, for every 2 beats played on the left-hand side, 3 should be played on the right-hand side. Polyrhythms get more complicated as the ratio gets higher. For instance, here's a 7:11 polyrhythm. It sounds very complex, and it's hard to hear any rhythmic relation between the two sides. But that's why they tend to be used, to spice up the rhythmic section of a song in the same way that certain voicings and dissonance can spice up the chord progression of a song. But that's a topic for another day. Finally, let's talk about time signature. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, most popular music is written in 4/4, but more progressive genres use time signature as a way to distance themselves from this property of pop music. Let's talk about 3/4, which many people would associate with a waltz. Instead of counting to 4, you count to 3 instead. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. In 5/4, it'd be counted as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This can lead to measures becoming painfully long though, like in the case of 7/4, which is counted as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, to shorten the measure to a reasonable length, we can change the second number of the time signature from 4 to 8. This means that instead of 7 quarter notes, a measure will contain 7/8 notes, which are half the length and time. This means it's now counted as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hopefully you've learnt a few things from this video, and hopefully I've explained everything well. If you want more videos centered around music theory, write a comment about which area you'd like me to explore.